The widowed rancher saw 3 black mail-order brides with sacks on their heads in the back of a dusty wagon. And when one whispered his dead wife's name, Arthur Morgan's world cracked open like drought-hardened earth. The Wyoming sun hung low and merciless. Arthur had been tracking the wagon train since dawn, something cold settling in his gut at the sight of armed escorts, shepherding what looked like cargo through his territory. The wind carried dust and the metallic taste of trouble. He spurred his horse harder. The ground beneath thundered with each stride, but the sound felt distant against the roar in his ears. 3 years of grief had taught him to recognize wrongness. In the air, this felt like the night Ellie died. The wagon lurched to a stop when Arthur cut across their path. His horse reared, hooves striking earth, and the escorts reached for their weapons. Arthur's hand found his gun grip but didn't draw. Not yet. Hold there. His voice cut through the desert quiet. The wagon master, a lean man with cruel eyes. Step forward, Micah Bell. Arthur recognized the type. Men who traded in human misery and called it business. You're on open range, Morgan. Move aside. Arthur's jaw tightened. They knew his name. That meant this wasn't coincidence. What's your cargo? Legal business. Mail-order brides heading to proper Christian homes. The words fell wrong. Arthur had seen mail-order brides before. They traveled with hope in their eyes and belongings in their hands. They didn't travel with sacks over their heads and rope around their wrists. He dismounted. Each step toward the wagon felt like walking toward a cliff edge. The escorts tensed, but Arthur kept his hands visible. The horses shifted nervously, sensing the weight of the moment. The wagon bed held 3 women. African American, young, bound and hooded with rough burlap. Their shoulders shook with exhaustion or fear, maybe both. Take the sacks off. Now see here, Morgan. Arthur's gun cleared leather faster than thought. The sound of metal on metal sang in the dry air. The sacks, off. Micah's face twisted. But he nodded to one of his men. The escort approached the wagon like he was handling rattlesnakes. His hands shook as he reached for the first sack. The moment stretched thin as wire. Arthur's heart hammered against his ribs. The desert held its breath. The first sack came away. A young woman blinked in the sudden light, her dark skin marked with exhaustion, but her eyes burning with intelligence. She looked at Arthur with wariness that went bone deep. The second sack revealed an older woman, maybe 30, with the bearing of someone who'd fought battles and won some of them. Her gaze swept the scene, cataloging threats and exits. The third woman seemed barely conscious. Her head lolled forward, breathing shallow. When the sack lifted, Arthur saw a face that couldn't have seen 20 summers. Fever painted her cheeks, and her lips moved soundlessly. Then she spoke, a whisper that carried across the desert like a prayer. Ellie Morgan. The world tilted. Arthur's gun hand wavered. The name hit him like a physical blow, driving air from his lungs. Ellie had been dead 3 years. Buried in the churchyard with the wooden cross he'd carved himself. How could this stranger know her name? What did you say? The young woman's eyes found his. Even through the fever, recognition flickered there. Ellie, the safe house, the fire. Arthur's blood turned to ice water. Nobody talked about the fire. The whole town had agreed it was an accident. A lamp knocked over in the night, tragic but simple. The kind of tragedy that happened to good people in hard country. But this woman spoke of it like she'd been there. Like she knew things Arthur didn't. You're making a mistake, Morgan. Micah's voice cut through Arthur's shock. These women are legal property, contracted and paid for. You interfere, you're stealing. Arthur looked at the 3 women again. Property. The word sat wrong in his mouth like spoiled meat. He'd seen enough of slavery's aftermath to know the taste of it. Property doesn't call out dead women's names. Fever talk, nonsense. But Arthur had heard the clarity in her voice, the recognition. This wasn't delirium. This was memory. The young woman tried to speak again, but her strength failed. Her head dropped forward. The older woman caught her. And Arthur saw something pass between them. Protection, loyalty, the kind of bond that came from shared suffering. "I'm taking them. Like hell you are." Arthur's gun swung toward Micah. The escorts reached for their weapons, but Arthur's voice stopped them cold. "I said I'm taking them. You can ride away and forget this happened, or you can try to stop me, your choice." The desert wind picked up, swirling dust between them. Arthur felt the weight of the moment, pressing down like summer heat. 3 women's lives hung in the balance, maybe his own too. But the young woman had spoken. Ellie's name had mentioned the fire. That changed everything. Micah's eyes narrowed. "You're making enemies you can't afford, Morgan. I've had worse." For a heartbeat, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Micah stepped back. His men followed. But their hands stayed near their guns. "This isn't over. It is for today." Arthur watched them mount up and ride away, leaving dust and threats hanging in the air. When they disappeared over the ridge, he turned back to the wagon. 3 pairs of eyes watched him with mixtures of hope and suspicion. The young woman who'd spoken Ellie's name had lost consciousness again. Her breathing came shallow and quick. The older woman held her protectively while the third watched Arthur with calculating eyes. "Can you ride?" The older woman nodded. "We can manage." Arthur untied their bonds with steady hands. The rope had left marks on their wrists, and anger kindled in his chest. But anger was a luxury he couldn't afford. Not with winter coming and enemies made. He helped them down from the wagon. The young woman barely stayed conscious, leaning heavily on her companions. Arthur brought his horse close and lifted her into the saddle. She weighed nothing. All bone and fever heat. "My ranch is 2 miles east. We'll talk there." But as they walked across the broken ground toward his homestead, Arthur wondered what kind of talk could explain how a stranger knew his dead wife's name, and what kind of trouble he'd just bought himself by caring about the answer. The ranch house sat weathered and tired against the endless sky. Arthur helped the fevered woman down from his horse while her companions watched him with the careful stillness of cornered animals. Trust would have to be earned in pieces, measured out like rationed water. Inside, the house held the hollow quiet of a place where laughter had died. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light that slanted through. Curtains Ellie had sewn. Arthur hadn't moved them in 3 years. Couldn't bring himself to change what she'd touched. The older woman surveyed the room with tactical precision. Her name was Laura. She'd offered during the ride. The third woman, Alex, had said nothing at all. She moved through the space like smoke, touching nothing, trusting nothing. Arthur laid the fevered woman on Ellie's old rocking chair. Her skin burned hot as summer stones. Her lips moved in whispered fragments. "Safe house. Fire. Ellie." "She needs water," Laura said. Arthur fetched a basin and clean cloth from the kitchen. When he returned, Laura was checking the woman's pulse with practiced fingers. Alex stood by the window, watching the horizon. "What's her name?" "Clementine." The name hung in the air. Arthur knelt beside the chair and dampened the cloth. "When?" He touched it to Clementine's forehead. She stirred. Her eyes opened, unfocused but searching. "The meeting," she whispered. Ellie was supposed to come to the meeting. Arthur's hands stilled. What meeting? But Clementine's eyes had already closed again. Her breathing settled into the rhythm of exhausted sleep. Laura stepped closer. "You want answers?" "My wife died 3 years ago. This woman knows things about her death that I don't. And you think we're going to tell you?" Arthur set the cloth aside and stood. Laura matched his height, met his gaze without flinching. She had the bearing of someone who'd fought for everything and lost most of it. "I pulled you out of that wagon. Doesn't that count for something?" Men have pulled us out of wagons before. Usually had their own reasons. The words cut deeper than she'd probably intended. Arthur turned away, staring out the window at the broken fence line he'd been meaning to fix for months. In the distance, dust moved against the wind. Riders on the ridge. "We're being watched," Alex said. Her voice carried the weight of someone who'd learned to notice danger before it noticed her. Arthur moved to the window. 3 riders sat motionless on the high ground, too far to identify but close enough to send a message. Micah hadn't forgotten. How long have they been there? Since we arrived. Arthur cursed under his breath. He'd brought these women to his home, and now his home was compromised. The ranch that had been his sanctuary was becoming a trap. "We should leave," Lara said. "Where? They'll follow us wherever we go. Then we fight." Arthur looked at her. Really looked. Lara carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd seen violence and survived it. But Clementine burned with fever, and Alex moved like a ghost. They weren't ready for a fight. "No, we wait. Learn what we're dealing with." Night fell heavy and moonless. Arthur built a fire in the hearth while the women took turns watching Clementine. Her fever broke near midnight, and she woke with sudden clarity. "Arthur Morgan." He looked up from the fire. "You know my name. Ellie talked about you. Said you were a good man who'd lost his way." The words hit him like physical blows. Arthur gripped the poker tighter, staring into the flames. "When did she say that?" "The night she died." Silence filled the room. Arthur felt the weight of 3 women's attention, felt the moment stretching towards something that would change everything. "Tell me about the fire." Clementine struggled to sit up. Lara helped her, and Arthur saw the protective instinct that bound them. These women had formed a family in the crucible of shared suffering. "It wasn't an accident," Clementine said. "Your wife was running a safe house, helping people find freedom. That night, she was supposed to meet my sister Sarah at the old mill. But someone had been watching, waiting." Arthur's chest tightened. "Who?" "Men with badges. Said they were keeping the peace, but they were keeping something else. Money, power, the kind that comes from owning people." The fire crackled in the hearth. Arthur watched the flames consume the wood, turning solid things to ash and memory. Everything he'd believed about Ellie's death was burning away. "She never told me. She was protecting you. Said you'd suffered enough in the war. Didn't want you carrying more ghosts." Arthur stood abruptly. The room felt too small, the air too thin. He walked to the window and stared out at the darkness. The watchers were still there, invisible but present. "My sister never made it to the meeting," Clementine continued. "Found her body in the river 3 days later. They said she'd fallen, but Sarah could swim better than most fish." Lara spoke into the silence. "Your wife died trying to save people." "That's not nothing." Arthur turned back to the room. 3 pairs of eyes watched him with something that might have been sympathy, or might have been judgment. "All this time, I thought it was just bad luck. Wrong place, wrong time." "There's no such thing as bad luck," Alex said. "Only bad people making bad choices." Arthur sat back down, suddenly exhausted. The fire cast shifting shadows on the walls, and he could almost see Ellie moving through the room, bringing food to strangers, offering hope to the hopeless. "Why didn't she tell me?" "Because you would have stopped her," Clementine said. "And she couldn't stop. Too many people needed help." The truth of it settled in Arthur's bones. He would have stopped her. Would have locked the doors and stood guard himself rather than let her risk her life for strangers. And that knowledge made him feel small and selfish. The men who killed her. "They're still out there. Some of them." Arthur met Clementine's eyes. "You know who they are." "I know who runs the network." "Who?" "Gives the orders." "Who profits from the suffering?" Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. The watchers on the ridge would be cold and uncomfortable. Good. Let them freeze while they waited for morning. "Get some rest," Arthur said. "All of you. We'll figure out what comes next when the sun rises." But as the women settled down for the night, Arthur remained by the fire. He stared into the flames and saw Ellie's face in the dancing light. Saw the woman she'd been and the woman she'd hidden from him. The woman who'd died for strangers while he'd been content to let the world burn as long as his small corner remained safe. Now strangers had brought the truth to his door, and the watchers on the ridge reminded him that safety was an illusion. It always had been. Arthur fed another log to the fire and watched it catch. Tomorrow would bring decisions. Tonight, he grieved for the wife he'd thought he'd known and the man he'd thought he'd been. Both were ash now. What rose from the ashes would be something different. Something that might be worthy of the woman who died saving others. The fire burned low, but Arthur didn't sleep. He kept watch through the window, counting shadows and waiting for dawn. Dawn broke gray and unforgiving. Arthur watched from the window as riders approached through the morning mist. They moved with the confidence of men who wore law on their chests and carried corruption in their hearts. Sheriff Dutch van der Linde led the group. His silver badge caught the early light, but his eyes held the darkness Arthur remembered from their last meeting. Behind him rode Micah Bell and 4 deputies, with the look of hired guns. "They're coming," Arthur said. The women moved without panic. Laura checked her boots, tested the window latch. Alex positioned herself where she could see both doors. Clementine sat straighter in the chair, fever-bright eyes tracking the approaching threat. Arthur stepped onto the porch. The morning air carried the scent of alkali dust and horse sweat. Dutch reined in 20 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to avoid a quick draw. "Morning, Arthur. Heard you had some visitors. My land. My business." Dutch smiled with practiced charm. "Now that's where you're wrong. These ladies are fugitives, stolen property. I'm here to collect what rightfully belongs to their contracted owners." Arthur's hand drifted toward his gun. "Property doesn't contract itself. Legal documents say otherwise." Dutch pulled folded papers from his coat. Even from a distance, Arthur could see official seals and signatures. The corruption ran deep. If they were forging federal documents, those women chose to come with me. Choice's got nothing to do with it. Law's the law. Behind Dutch, Micah shifted in his saddle. His fingers drummed against his thigh in rhythm with some internal violence. The man wanted blood. Arthur could smell it on him. "Stand aside, Arthur. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Or what?" Dutch's smile faded. "Or I'll arrest you for theft, harboring fugitives, and interfering with legal commerce. Your choice." Arthur felt the weight of the moment pressing down. 3 women depended on his decision. 3 lives hung in the balance of his courage or cowardice. "I've made my choice." The words hung in the air between them. Dutch's face hardened into something Arthur recognized from the war. The look of a man who decided killing was necessary. "Then you're under arrest." "For what crime?" "Theft of contracted property. Harboring fugitives. Resisting a federal officer." Arthur laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Federal officer?" "You're county sheriff, Dutch. Haven't been federal anything since you got drummed out of the marshals for taking bribes." Dutch's hand moved toward his gun. The other riders tensed, reading the shift in their leader's mood. Violence gathered in the morning air like storm clouds. "Careful, Arthur. Your mouth's writing checks your gun can't cash." "My gun's been paid up for years." Through the window, Arthur caught Laura's eye. She nodded once. They were ready for whatever came next. Dutch studied Arthur's face, looking for weakness or doubt. He found neither. The calculation in his eyes shifted from confidence to uncertainty. "You're making enemies you can't afford." "I'm making enemies I should have made years ago." The standoff stretched like wire under tension. Arthur felt sweat between his shoulder blades despite the cool morning. One wrong move would paint his porch with blood. Then Clementine appeared in the doorway. She moved slowly, still weak from fever, but her voice carried clearly across the distance. "I know you, Sheriff. You were at the river the night my sister died." Dutch's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about. Sarah Williams. You held her under the water until she stopped fighting." The words hit Dutch like physical blows. His horse shifted nervously, sensing its rider's tension. Arthur saw the truth written in the sheriff's expression. Guilt and fear warred with practiced denial. "You're delirious." "Fever talk. I watched from the trees. Saw you take money from the man in the fancy coat. Saw you push her head down when she tried to swim to shore." Clementine's voice never wavered. Each word landed with the weight of witnessed truth. Arthur felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. "That's a serious accusation," Arthur said. "It's a lie," Dutch snapped. "The word of a runaway against a sworn officer." "Then you won't mind if we ride to town. Let folks hear what she has to say." Dutch's hand inched toward his gun. "Nobody's riding anywhere. These women are coming with me, now." Arthur stepped forward. "Over my dead body. That can be arranged." The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Arthur could feel death hovering in the space between them. Could taste gunpowder on the wind. Then Lara appeared beside Clementine. Her voice cut through the tension with military precision. "There are more of us than you know. Networks you can't imagine. People who've been watching your operation for months." Dutch's eyes narrowed. "What operation?" "The one that ships women like cattle to men who think money can buy souls. The one that eliminates anyone who interferes." Alex stepped into view, completing the trio. "We know about the trading post. About Preston Garvey. About the buyers who think human beings are commodities." Arthur saw fear creep into Dutch's expression. The sheriff had expected to face one broken rancher, not witnesses who could unravel his entire conspiracy. "You're playing a dangerous game." "Ladies, we've been playing it longer than you," Lara said. "And we're better at it." Dutch looked at his men, weighing odds and options. 6 against 4 should have been easy numbers. But Arthur saw doubt in the deputies' faces. They'd signed up to arrest fugitives, not murder witnesses. "This isn't over," Dutch said. "No." Arthur agreed. "It's not." Dutch wheeled his horse around. His men followed, but Arthur caught the backward glances, the uncertain postures. Cracks were showing in the sheriff's authority. As the riders disappeared into the morning haze, Arthur turned to the women. They stood together in his doorway, united by shared danger and mutual trust. "They'll be back," Lara said. "With more men," Alex added. Arthur nodded. "Then we'd better be ready." Clementine leaned against the doorframe, exhausted by the confrontation. "There's something else you need to know. About the night your wife died." Arthur felt his chest tighten. "What?" "She wasn't alone in the house. There was someone else. Someone who got away." "Who?" "A child. Maybe 8 years old. Your wife died making sure she escaped." Arthur closed his eyes. Even in her final moments, Ellie had been saving others. The knowledge cut deep, but it also kindled something in his chest. Something that felt like purpose. "We need to find that child," he said. "We need to find Preston Garvey," Lara corrected. "Stop this at the source." Arthur looked at the 3 women who'd brought truth to his door. They'd lost everything but hadn't lost hope. They'd been broken, but not beaten. Then, "That's what we'll do." The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the mist and revealing the harsh beauty of the landscape. Arthur felt something shifting inside him, like winter ice breaking up on a river. The man who'd been content to let the world burn was dying. In his place, something harder and more purposeful was being born. The reckoning was coming. And Arthur, Morgan intended to be ready for it. The provisions ran thin by the 3rd day. Arthur counted the remaining flour and beans while Lara watched the horizon through field glasses. The watchers had multiplied. 6 riders now, maybe 7, keeping. Just out of rifle range. They're waiting for something, Lara said. Arthur sealed the flour tin, for us to starve or surrender. Neither's happening. Alex worked at the kitchen table, her careful hands turning scraps of paper into something that looked official. Forged documents had become her specialty during the journey north, another skill learned in the crucible of survival. How long before winter? Clementine asked. Arthur studied the sky. Clouds massed to the north, heavy with the promise of snow. 6 weeks, maybe less. The unspoken truth hung between them. Winter would trap them here, make them easy prey for Dutch's men. They needed to move, but movement meant exposure. And exposure meant death. Clementine spread a hand-drawn map across the table. The trading post is here. 2 days' ride through. The canyon. Arthur traced the route with his finger. The path wound through narrow passes and exposed ridges. Perfect country for an ambush. Too dangerous, he said. Everything's dangerous now. Lara lowered the field glasses. They're moving. Coming down from the ridge. Arthur grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. 4 riders approached under a flag of truce. Dutch led them, his silver badge catching the afternoon light. Behind him rode Mecca and 2 men Arthur didn't recognize. What do you want? Arthur called from the porch. To talk. Just talk. Arthur kept his rifle ready. Talk from there. Dutch reined in 50 feet away. Close enough for conversation, far enough to avoid sudden violence. His horse stamped nervously, reading the tension in its rider. You're surrounded, Arthur. No food, no water, no way out. Time to be reasonable. Reasonable would be you riding away and forgetting we exist. Can't do that. Too many people asking questions about missing property. Arthur's jaw tightened. They're not property. Law says different. Federal marshals are coming to settle. This proper. You want to explain to them why you're harboring fugitives? Through the window, Arthur saw Alex stiffen. Federal marshals would mean real consequences, prison or worse. When? Tomorrow. Maybe the day after. Depends on how long it takes word to reach Denver. Dutch's smile held no warmth. Course, if the ladies were to turn themselves in now, might be we could work something out. Proper legal channels, due process, all that. Arthur laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Due process from you? That's rich. I'm a sworn officer of the law. You're a murderer who wears a badge. Dutch's face darkened. Careful, Arthur. There's still time to walk away from this. No, there isn't. The words carried the weight of absolute decision. Arthur felt the moment crystallize around him, all possibilities narrowing to a single point of no return. Then you've signed your death warrant. Maybe, but I'll die for something that matters. Dutch studied Arthur's face, looking for weakness. Or doubt. He found neither. The calculation in his eyes shifted from confidence to frustration. You always were a stubborn fool. Better than being a coward who kills women. The accusation hit Dutch like a physical blow. His hand moved toward his gun, but Arthur's rifle was already aimed at his chest. Easy now, Dutch said. No need. For blood, yet. Arthur kept the rifle steady. Depends on you. Dutch signaled his men. They turned their horses and rode back toward the ridge, leaving dust and unspoken threats in their wake. He's scared, Clementine said from the doorway. Scared men are dangerous men. Arthur replied. Alex finished her work at the table. Papers are ready. Travel documents for a family heading to California. Might buy us passage through federal checkpoints. Arthur studied the forged documents. The work was flawless, professional. Another reminder that these women had survived by being better than their enemies. How do we get to the trading post without being seen? Lara returned to the map. There's an old mining trail. Hasn't been used in years. Rough country. but it'll get us there. How rough? Rough enough that Dutch won't expect us to use it. Arthur traced the alternate route. It wound through Badlands and Broken Stone, country that would punish horses and riders alike. But it avoided the main roads where Dutch's men waited. When do we leave? Tonight. New moon means no light, but also no shadow. Arthur looked at the three women who'd brought purpose back to his empty life. They'd asked for nothing but protection. In return, they'd given him a reason to fight again. This is about more than just us, he said. It always was, Clementine replied. Your wife knew that, died knowing that. Arthur felt the truth of it settle in his bones. Ellie had seen the larger picture, understood that some fights were worth dying for. Now he understood it too. The child who escaped the night Ellie died, you know who she was? Clementine nodded. Emma, 8 years old. Sweet girl with quick hands and a quicker mind. Where is she now? If she's alive, she's at the trading post. Preston Garvey collects children who have nowhere else to go. Arthur's chest tightened. What does he do with them? Trains them, makes them useful, teaches them to be grateful for the food and shelter he provides. The words carried implications that made Arthur's stomach turn. Children were the most vulnerable prey in a world that fed on vulnerability. We get them out, he said. All of them. That's not a rescue, Laura said. That's a war. Arthur checked his rifle, counted his ammunition. Then we'd better be ready to fight one. The sun sank toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Arthur watched the watchers on the ridge, memorizing their positions and patterns. By tomorrow night, they'd be gone or dead. You don't have to do this, Alex said. We can find another way. Arthur looked at her, seeing the concern in her eyes. These women had lost so much already. They didn't need to lose him too. Yes, I do. Ellie would have done it. Should have been there to help her do it. You can't change the past. No, but I can honor it. The light faded from the sky, leaving stars scattered across the darkness. Arthur made his final preparations, checking weapons and supplies. Tomorrow would bring answers or death. Maybe both. In the distance, a coyote howled. The sound echoed across the broken land, wild and mournful. Arthur listened until it faded, then turned back to the house where three women waited for justice. The reckoning was coming. And Arthur Morgan intended to be ready for it. The Grand Canyon trading post sat like a wound in the red earth. Arthur studied the compound through field glasses, counting guards and exits. 2 days of hard riding through broken country had brought them to the edge of Preston Garvey's empire. 12 men visible, Laura whispered. Maybe more inside. Arthur adjusted the focus. The main building sprawled across a natural shelf in the canyon wall, built to be defended. Outbuildings clustered around it like mushrooms after rain. All of them reinforced. All of them watched. There. Clementine pointed to a smaller structure behind the main house. That's where they keep the women. Arthur saw barred windows and heavy doors, a prison disguised as a dormitory. His chest tightened at the thought of what happened inside those walls. How many? Last I was here, maybe 20. Could be more now. Alex studied the approach routes. Guard posts here and here. Overlapping fields of fire. They've thought this through. Arthur lowered the glasses. The compound was a fortress, designed to keep people in and enemies out. A frontal assault would be suicide, but Ellie had died trying to save one child. These women deserved better than abandonment. There's another way, Clementine said. Service entrance on the north side, where they bring supplies. Guarded, usually just one man. Preston's overconfident. Never thought anyone would be fool enough to attack him directly. Arthur smiled grimly. Then he's about to learn something new. They waited for full dark. Arthur checked his weapons. One final time. feeling the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. Below in the canyon, lanterns flickered in the compound windows. Each light represented a life in Preston's hands. "You don't have to do this," Laura said. Arthur looked at her. Even in the darkness, he could see the concern in her eyes. These women had already lost too much. They didn't need to lose him too. "Yes, I do." "Why?" Arthur was quiet for a long moment. "Because I should have been there when Ellie needed me. Should have known what she was fighting for. This won't bring her back." "No, but it might make her death mean something." They moved down the canyon wall in silence. Arthur felt each step in his bones, the weight of purpose driving him forward. Behind him, 3 women who'd already risked everything followed into the darkness. The service entrance was exactly where Clementine had promised. A single guard, dozed in a chair, his rifle across his lap. Arthur approached from behind, moving carefully across the loose stone. The guard woke as Arthur's shadow fell across him. His eyes widened, but Arthur's hand was already over his mouth. They struggled briefly, then the guard went limp. Arthur lowered him to the ground and took his keys. "He's not dead," Arthur said to Laura's questioning look. "Should be." Arthur unlocked the door. "Maybe, but we're not murderers." The corridor. Inside was narrow and poorly lit. Arthur moved carefully, listening for sounds of movement. The building felt heavy with suffering, walls that had absorbed too much pain. They found the women in the 3rd room they checked. 23 of them, ranging in age from barely 16 to maybe 40. All bore the marks of poor treatment and constant fear. "Who are you?" one asked. "Friends," Clementine said. "We're getting you out of here. They'll kill us if we try to leave. They'll kill you anyway, eventually." Arthur saw the truth register in their faces. These women had been living on borrowed time, and they knew it. Hope warred with terror. In their expressions, "We need to move quickly," he said. "Stay quiet, stay together." They were halfway to the exit when footsteps echoed in the corridor behind them. Arthur turned to see Preston Garvey emerge from the shadows, flanked by 2 armed men. The trading post owner was smaller than Arthur had expected, but his eyes held the cold calculation of a man who'd built an empire on human misery. Well, Arthur Morgan. You're either very brave or very stupid." Arthur kept his gun trained. On Preston's chest. "Maybe both. You're trespassing on private property. Stealing valuable assets. These women aren't assets." Preston smiled. "Everything's an asset to someone willing to pay the right price. Your wife learned that lesson too late." Arthur felt rage kindle in his chest. "You killed her." "I gave the order." Dutch pulled the trigger. "Well, set the fire, technically, but the result was the same." The admission hung in the air between them. Arthur felt the weight of his gun, the easy solution of violence. One shot would end Preston Garvey's reign of terror. "Go ahead," Preston said. "Pull the trigger. Become the killer you've always been inside." Arthur's finger tightened on the trigger. Preston's men raised their weapons, but Arthur had the drop. On them. He could end this now with blood and bullets. "Don't," Laura said quietly. "That's not justice. That's revenge." Arthur looked at her, then at the women they'd come to save. They watched him with eyes that had seen too much violence, too much death. They needed a rescuer, not another killer. "You're right," Arthur said. He kept his gun trained on Preston but didn't fire. "Justice is better than revenge." Preston's smile faltered. "Justice? From who? Dutch owns the law in 3 counties. Not all of it." Arthur heard footsteps in the corridor. Federal marshals appeared, drawn by reports of a massive trafficking operation. Preston's face went pale as he realized his protection had finally failed him. "Preston Garvey," the lead marshal said. "You're under arrest for human trafficking, conspiracy, and murder." Arthur lowered his gun as the marshals moved in. Preston's men surrendered without a fight, recognizing the futility of resistance. The Trading Post's reign of terror was ending not with gunfire, but with handcuffs and legal process. "How?" Preston asked as they led him away. Arthur looked at Alex, who held a stack of forged documents that had become real evidence. "Someone who's better at this than you are." As Preston disappeared into custody, Arthur felt something shift inside him. The rage that had driven him here was cooling, replaced by something that felt almost like peace. "It's over, Clementine." Sighed. Arthur nodded. "This part is." They led the rescued women out into the night air. Above them, stars wheeled across the desert sky, ancient and indifferent. But Arthur felt the weight of justice accomplished, of lives saved and wrongs made right. "What happens now?" one of the women asked. Arthur looked at Lara, Alex, and Clementine. They'd become more than allies during this journey. They'd become family, forged in the crucible of shared struggle. "Now we go home," he said, "all of us." The words carried the weight of promise and possibility. Arthur had found his purpose. Again, and it wasn't revenge. It was redemption, earned. Through the choice to save rather than destroy. The desert wind picked up, carrying the scent of distant rain. Arthur breathed it in and felt hope stirring in his chest. Ellie would have been proud of what they'd accomplished. More importantly, she would have been proud of how they'd accomplished it. Justice, not vengeance. Mercy, not murder. The difference mattered more than Arthur had ever realized. 2 months later, Arthur stood in the doorway of the rebuilt bunkhouse, watching the morning sun paint the mountains gold. The ranch that had been a tomb was becoming a sanctuary. Voices drifted from the kitchen where Clementine prepared breakfast. For the newest arrivals, 3 women from the trading post had chosen to stay. Others had moved on, carrying letters of recommendation and enough money to start fresh. But some had found in Arthur's broken land what they'd been seeking all along. A place to heal. "Coffee's ready," Clementine called. Arthur walked to the kitchen, boots echoing on floorboards that no longer creaked with loneliness. The house felt alive again, filled with purpose and the quiet bustle of daily life. Emma sat at the kitchen table, the 8-year-old girl who'd survived the night Ellie died. She'd been among the children rescued from Preston's compound, though she barely remembered Arthur's wife. Still, she carried something of Ellie in her bright eyes and quick smile. "Morning, Mr. Arthur." "Morning, Emma. Sleep well?" She nodded, returning to the book Alex had given her. Reading was becoming her refuge, words offering escape from memories too dark for childhood. Arthur poured coffee and stepped onto the porch. The ranch stretched before him, transformed by months of hard work and shared purpose. New fences replaced the broken ones. The barn wore fresh paint. Gardens flourished where weeds had grown. But the changes went deeper than wood and nails. The land itself felt different, as if it had remembered what it meant to shelter life instead of just containing it. Lara emerged from the barn, leading a horse that had thrown a shoe. She'd stayed longer than planned, her departure date pushed back week by week until no one mentioned it anymore. The federal marshals had offered her a position hunting down the remaining trafficking networks. She'd accepted, but used Arthur's ranch as her base of operations. "Marshal Thompson's coming today," she said. "Says he has news about Dutch." Arthur nodded. Dutch van der Linde had been sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. The corrupt sheriff who'd killed Ellie would spend the rest of his life behind. Bars, justice, served cold and complete. Good news? The best kind. Preston's network is finished. Last of the buyers in custody. Arthur felt satisfaction settle in his chest. Preston Garvey had given up his co-conspirators in exchange for life in prison instead of the hangman's noose. The trading post sat empty now, its buildings already beginning to crumble back into the desert. Alex's clinic in town had become a beacon for those seeking help. She'd discovered a gift for healing that went beyond medicine, offering hope to people who'd forgotten what it felt like. The woman who'd once moved through the world like a ghost now anchored an entire community. She's thinking of expanding, Lara said, following Arthur's gaze toward town. Wants to open a school for children who've had difficult starts. Like Emma. Like all of us. Arthur sipped his coffee, tasting the bitter truth in those words. They were all refugees from broken lives, finding wholeness and shared purpose. The ranch had become a way station for the wounded, a place where healing could happen slowly and safely. Will you stay? Arthur asked. Lara was quiet for a long moment. For now. There's still work to do, Arthur understood. The network was broken, but the conditions that had created it remained. Poverty, desperation, and the willingness of evil men to profit from both. The fight would continue, just in different forms. We could use the help. I know. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ranch come alive around them. Other residents emerged from the bunkhouse, ready to begin another day of rebuilding. Former victims becoming survivors, survivors becoming protectors. Arthur walked to the small cemetery on the hill behind the house. Ellie's grave sat beneath a cottonwood tree, the wooden cross weathered but still standing. He'd carved new words into the wood. Beloved wife, defender of the innocent, her light lives on. I kept my promise, he said to the headstone. Found. The child you saved. She's safe now. They all are. The wind stirred the cottonwood leaves, and Arthur chose to hear approval in the sound. Ellie would have loved what the ranch had become. A place where the broken could heal, where the lost could find direction. He'd built something worthy of her memory. Arthur returned to the house to find Clementine teaching Emma to knead bread dough. The girls. Small hands worked the mixture with patient concentration, and Arthur saw an echo of the woman who'd once filled this kitchen with warmth. She's a quick learner, Clementine said. Gets that from her mother. Arthur paused. The woman who died. Trying to save her, Emma looked up. Will you tell me about her sometime? Arthur smiled. I'd be honored to. The afternoon brought visitors. A wagon train of families heading west, drawn by stories of a rancher who offered safe passage and fair treatment. Arthur and his extended family welcomed them with food and shelter, asking nothing in return except that they extend the same kindness to others. As evening approached, Arthur sat on the porch with Lara, Clementine, and Alex. The four of them had become something Arthur had never expected to find again. A family, chosen rather than born, bound by shared struggle and mutual respect. Any regrets? Lara asked. Arthur considered the question. The man who'd rescued 3 women from a trafficking wagon was gone, replaced by someone who understood that salvation was a daily choice, not a single act of heroism. No, he said finally. None. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of hope. Arthur watched the light fade and felt peace settle in his bones. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people needing help. But tonight, they were home. The ranch that had been a monument to loss had become a testament to renewal. And in the quiet spaces between words, Arthur heard the echo of Ellie's laughter, approving of what they'd built together. The broken land was healing. The broken people were healing. And in that healing, Arthur had found his purpose again. Not revenge, but justice. Not solitude, but community. Not an ending, but a beginning. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming rain. Arthur breathed it in and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new growth, new possibilities, new reasons to keep fighting for what was right. And that was enough. More than enough, and that is all to the story for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.